Well, welcome back to the channel, everyone, and it has been a few little weeks since we did our last video, which was actually on micro-paste fishing, and the views have been amazing. Everyone seems to have loved it. It's gone down really well. Bit of a different approach to fishing paste, you know, fishing really close in for small fish. A method I didn't come up with. Anglers like Neil Machin, Lee Thornton came up with it years and years ago, and at the venue where I fish, Shearsby Valley, it was absolutely perfect. Now, as a follow-on for that, I thought I'd run you through a couple of matches that I fished recently where, especially in one, that sort of micro-paste has really come in. I fished one of the qualifiers at Shearsby Valley Lakes. Now, it's a venue I go to a lot. It's 20 minutes from my house. It's just perfect for my fishing at the moment. I can go there, I can be back in good time. It's just a great place to go fishing as well. And they run qualifiers, I think it's every Saturday, and then they have like a grand final in September time for like a decent amount of money. And it's one of those events where I like to get in the final every year if I can, and you know, I've been focusing on trying to get in it lately. You've got to win the match though, so obviously it's no good winning your section or anything like that, so you've got to go and win the match. Anyway, when I fished that micro-paste video that everybody seemed to love, it was one of those, like, it just seemed right for that time. It was perfect. So I booked myself on the following week, and I actually drew a peg I've been wanting to draw, peg 46 on Tornado, which is slap bang in the middle of the far bank. I've been drawing on a near bank the last few times I've been, and the wind doesn't seem to catch it, or the wind at the moment that keeps blowing doesn't seem to catch the near bank, and it definitely makes a difference. Anyway, I drew 46, the wind was smacking my kisser, and it just looked amazing. What I have noticed there is, you know, margin fishing plays a massive part there. You could catch half your weight, if not more, in the last sort of 35-40 minutes. And I've noticed that unless you've got a bit of wind in the edge, it just doesn't happen. They come in, but it's really hard to catch them. So anyway, the wind was smacking my face and it just looked amazing. I knew I'd catch down the edge, and it was just a case of how I would fill in them first few hours waiting for the carp to come in the margins. It was quite a strong wind, so I didn't fancy shallow fishing or anything like that, although I'm sure now, looking back, I would have caught fish shallow as well. But I really wanted to get my head down on that micro-paste. I got a load of footage from the day. Unfortunately, I was going to do a live match, but unfortunately my GoPro actually died with about an hour to go, which is a shame because I had some great fish down the edge. But anyway, so I'll play some of the footage while I'm talking. And what I did, I fished, I set up a paste rig for where I normally fish it, Top Kitten 2, which is about 5 foot deep. And then I fished my micro-paste on a Top Kit +1, where it's about 4 foot-ish. And then I actually set up a big paste rig over the top. So I've got my micro-paste, which obviously gives me the option of catching the smaller fish. But then I've got the big paste rig for later in the session. I was hoping that I may catch some bigger carp like later on over the top. The 5 metre line I felt was just somewhere to kick off, to be honest, while that short line built in. It sounds funny feeding two swims so close together, but because there's quite a difference in depth, I do believe that you get different fish in the different depths. So even though they're close together, I do believe they're far enough apart. And then the only other rig I set up was for down the edge. Lovely edge peg this. You've got a long edge to your left where there's no cover, so you can get into whatever depth that you want to get into. And at Shearsby, you can literally get into in inches if you want to, all the way out to sort of whatever depth you want. So anyway, I kicked off. I fed, I don't know if you noticed, but I always feed my swimmers before putting my nets in, because you've got to put your nets in on the hooter there. And I noticed so many people bosh the nets in and then feed, whereas I always think, like, if I can get my bait in, then do my nets, I can always get a quick fish, and so it proved. I put just literally a palm full of hemp in at 5 metres on the whistle, and then I put a big pot of soft 4mm, exactly the same as what I did in the last video. I put them in on the top 4 line, and then I didn't even touch the edge. I wasn't even intending to feed that until an hour and a half to go, probably, depending on how the fishing was going, obviously. So on the 5 metre line, I kicked off with my usual great big piece of paste, and I caught a carp straight away. It wasn't a big one, a couple of pound, but a great start. And then as soon as I landed that fish, first chuck, and then after that it was a bit hard. You could just tell it was going to be the usual day at Shearsby where the carp are really slow to come. So with that fish netted, I just thought, right, now's the time. It was clear that sort of 5 metre pace just wasn't going to happen, so got my head down on the small fish. and it was brilliant. I had probably 2.5 hours where it was a fisher chuck. Loads of crusions, interestingly. Real nice chunky crusions that are actually bigger than the F1s. I fed it the same as what I did in the video, little hard balls, and it was really good while the small fish were there. I could keep them on the bottom, swing my paste right on top of it, and it would just go straight away. It was a 4x14 F1 pellet float, just like in the video. Little bulk. I used a size 14 SFL hook, and it was perfect. The only change I did make, and I mentioned it in the last video, I used the 11 Duraslip instead of the 13. It just seemed better. I must admit, the 13 was a little bit strong. The 11 was better. So I used that. I could still net them without breaking down, as you'll see in the footage. But it just was better, I felt. A little bit softer on the strike. So anyway, I fished that for a couple of hours, and as the fishing went on, I don't know if I was like thinning the little fish out, or maybe some bigger fish was coming in, but it was just getting slower. You could just sense that it was changing, and sort of with 2 hours to go, I started loose feeding 4 mils over the top, just the same softened 4 mils. They're just the fishery pellets, and I absolutely saturate them in water so that they're breaking down basically. And I was throwing 2 handfuls in, lowering my paste over it, and I started catching decent F1s. Now there's not loads of them in that lake, but I was catching good pound, 2 pound F1s, odd little carp, again pound sort of size. And the fishing was really good, and I was catching well. The only thing is Danny to my right, who was in the corner peg, he was catching some real big carp, not loads, but he was catching enough to probably stay ahead of me. And in the back of my head, I'm thinking I need to beat him, but I didn't really know what weight I was going to have. But I just kept going, kept plugging away, and in the end, it actually turned out that I had 80 pound of small fish. It wasn't 80 pound of those little tiny ones. I had 56 pound, I think, of the little tiny ones. And then I had, 30 odd pound of 30 pound of the better, those pounders. So it was really, really effective fishing, that micro pace was. And then with an hour to go, I've simply fed 1 pot of Super Crush Green ground bait. That is it. I don't think you need to feed a lot of bait at Shearsby by any means. I see people with big buckets of ground bait, and I just don't think it's necessary. There's an odd peg where you haven't got that wind cover, where you might need to force them up there. But in my experience, the more bait you feed, the worse it gets. So anyway, so I fed 1 pot of ground bait just to get them there, and I was hoping that my pace hook bait would be enough to hold them, and that's how it proved. I started off in 2 foot, which is normally a really good depth to catch them there. Started off in 2 foot, great big bits of paste, and all I was doing, every time I fed my paste, I was putting a little bit of hemp in my pot, and then just potting it in. And I'm sure the oil and stuff off the hemp just makes them home in on my hook bait that little bit quicker. I foul hooked a few in that 2 foot, and it was obvious. It was one of the days, it hasn't happened to me yet this year there, because I've been in the pegs without the wind. But this time the wind was like hacking in, like I said, and then we're going straight up into the shallow water, the fish were. And I've not had that this year. So what I quickly did is I had another rig set up, and I set it a foot deep, and I fish it really over depth. I actually use one of the Paste 1 floats. And I don't know if you can see that, I've doctored it slightly. I've chopped the stem in half. And what I do, it's something that I've done for a number of years. I fish the paste. A lot of people use polyballs, which are absolutely fine, but I just don't feel like I can read my bites properly. So what I actually fish is the float, a little float like that on the surface. So if you imagine I'm fishing here, I'm fishing probably a good float length over depth. I'm not really that concerned about it, because when you're fishing with that pace, there's no shot down the line or anything. They just take it without caution. So the last thing you want is your float doing this, pulling your hook out of the paste. So what I do, I lay that on the top, well over depth. I have my pole on the bank basically, and then there's no shot down the line. And I just think it's the best way you can fish for the edge fish that are really crafty. I'm sure they spook off bulks, I'm sure of it. I'm sure they feel that tight line and bolt off, and you know it when you're fishing in the edge, especially at Shearsby, because they're so crafty. You'll get them coming in, you see them, you think, I'm going to get one, and then just bow wave out your peg. With this never happens. It's almost like you put your paste in, and like I say, I use a big piece on the hook, and I'm sure that it's almost like putting a pot of ground bait in. I'm sure they come straight to it. Because I have this pretty slack on the top, there's no tension at all. There's no shot on my rig to spook them. There's nothing. My pole's out the way. Everything's right. And what happens is they just come in, and all of a sudden that'll tip up like that. You see it go like that. That's probably, it's already got it on. The fish is probably already on at this point. But what I do, I wait for it. It stands up like that and just buries, and all you see is your elastic coming out. It's an amazing way of fishing. And I think I caught 10 or 11 carp down the edge that day, and it was one of the best I've had it. I've had it twice on there, where I'm literally potting my bait in and just getting one straight away, and that's exactly how it was. I lost a couple trying to rush them in. I thought Danny was really ahead of me, and I was bullying him in a bit. On to bullying him in. I used the 15 Jervis slip. I've been using this since just after lockdown, and to be honest with you, it's transformed my margin fishing. The reason I say that is I use 13 hollow a lot, and 15 hollow, and the problem is at Shearsby, because the margins are so shallow, they shoot off and they bottom you out, and then you get hook pull. Now with this, it doesn't happen. It's like it's soft enough to guide them out the swim, but they don't get head of steam and sort of swim off. Oh no, and I don't like that, and then they come in, and it's not bullying them. It's just got this progressive power, this stuff that I've never seen before. So really, really good that is, and that's not just me just being pluggy. That is, it's gospel, that is, and combined with that size 10 XSH hook that I use for paste, it's just an awesome combo. So yeah, so that was the match. I had £136, which is a big weight for Shearsby at the moment. There's not many £100 plus weights at the moment. The fishing has been a bit funny, and I won the match comfortably in the end. So it was nice to get back in that final. I'm going to keep going a few times now before the final and just keep my eye in. I'm hoping that there will be some more 5 metre pace fish to catch. But if it means getting my head down on them small fish, then so be it. So that was really good, getting that match win under my belt there and getting in that final. There's one more match that I wanted to talk about, and that is the King of the Banks qualifier. Now, when I used to work for Match Fishing Magazine, we used to visit a venue called Barbie Banks all the time. We used to do tackle testing there. It used to be right near work, and even when Tom and John Arthur and that worked there, we used to run evening matches. So it's a venue I used to really enjoy fishing in, and I've just never ever really got around to fishing it in matches apart from these evening matches. Anyway, the other week I was looking for something to fish. There was nothing on local. Like I say, I'm all about my local fishing at the moment. Don't want to travel too far. So I noticed that King of the Banks was on, which is again, it's another sort of just like the Shearsby qualifiers. It's like you win your section and you go through to the final. So I thought, well, I'll drop on that. I drew peg 53, I think it was, yeah, 53, which looked brilliant. It's in the widest bit of the lake. The wind was blowing down. It just looked amazing. However, that day the day before, it was 35 degrees on the Friday, and it dropped sharply overnight. You probably remember the day I'm talking about. And I know that them days, they're always trouble they are when it comes to fishing. I think the oxygen plummets, and I just know that the fish aren't feeding. And all the talk before the draw was, £200 to win, and I just couldn't see it. The match was fished 10 till 3 as well, so you're missing out. Normally they fish till 4 or even 5, so you're missing out on the best time of the day, really. And I just knew it'd be hard. So I wanted to fish pace like I always do, but I just knew that I'd have to fish the far bank at some point. So I set up my usual, exactly the same margin setup as what I used at Shearsby, and I also set up some across rigs. I've caught loads of fish across there. I normally fish like micros and expanders. I didn't fancy that, so I was feeding micros and then fishing like a worm or a piece of corn on the hook. It was like nearly 17 metres wide where I was fishing, so it was wide peg. So what I did, I was fishing on that, and it was just really hard fishing. I was catching an odd little carp, an odd skimmer. It was just tough, really hard fishing. I couldn't get many bites. I was having to be really aggressive with my pellets over there to get anything to happen. If I came away from the island a bit into the slightly deeper water, nothing had happened at all. And then if I went into the shallow water, it'd take a lot of bait to get one there, but I would hook it. And I was foul looking them. It was just one of those days. I looked around and everyone was foul looking them. I could just tell the fish just weren't happy. Anyway, I plugged along on that, just pretty much just trying to put a few fish in my net until the last hour, and hopefully they'd turn up on my pace line. And that's kind of what happened. I just ticked along. I only had 20 odd pound of small fish across. But that was like, I think it was like 15 little carp and a few other skimmers and an odd tench and that. But then when I went down the edge, it was funny. I fished it a bit different here, and I don't know if it was right or wrong. I fished sloppy pellets instead of ground bait. It's something Andy Finley's been doing, and I'd been out filming with him and he taught me into doing it. Basically, I got a load of our 6mm Pro Feed pellets, covered them in boiling water, just left them overnight, and it was like a beautiful, like sloppy, pasty, pellety mix, and it's heavy, which is what I like. It goes straight to the bottom when you feed it, so there's definitely some mileage in that, but a bit more experimentation is needed. So I was feeding that down the edge and then putting my paste, which again, I did it a little bit different. I actually used exactly the same as what I was feeding on the hook. Great big balls of it. And because it was like still not quite broken down, there was bits of pellet in my paste and everything. And I really liked it because I could pot it in and you could tell it was so heavy that it would just sit there. And it worked quite nice. I think I had 8 or 9 carp down the edge, which was good. I ended up with 56 pound, which doesn't sound a big weight, but that was second in the match, and qualified me for the final. So that was really good. Interesting day. I'd love to fish it again. And I noticed that the following week there was another qualifier and the venue fished much better. I think nearly £200 one. So it just shows that you know, it really was that weather that made the difference, and this week will be exactly the same. So if you're out this weekend, keep an eye on that. These storms after hot days like this, that's trouble, that is, for fishing. So I expect like the fishing to be quite tough this weekend, you know, if you're going out. So that's it. Nice little run through of some matches. Like I said, there's a bit of live match footage throughout this video. Hopefully you enjoy that. I'll try and do that a bit more actually, because it makes it quite nice to talk about when you've got the footage over the top. Just a shame that the old GoPro died when I needed it in the last hour and the margin fishing was good. But yes, I hopefully you enjoyed that. Thanks everyone who watched the micro pace video. Don't forget to subscribe, click like, comment below. Thank you very much guys. Thanks for watching.